Hey guys, it's Libby and welcome to my wrap up for the month of May. In May, I read 2 novels, 1 short story collection, and 1 standalone short story. So I read Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress by Sijie, which was translated from the French by Rilke. When I read it, I actually didn't know it was originally written in French. I don't know if I would have read the original French. Probably not. It takes me a lot longer to read in French than in English, so I will normally only do that for things that I have confidence that I will enjoy. This book is set in the 1970s in a Chinese re-education camp where we encounter 2 teenage boys. One of them doesn't have a name, he's our narrator, and his friend Luo is the other primary character. And this book was based on Sijie's own experiences in a re-education camp. Re-education camp. Labor camp or prison camp are better terms. So our narrator and Luo are there because their parents are highly educated, which is no good for Chairman Mao and the new Communist Party. There isn't a really strong plot thread, it's more a series of vignettes, many of which do revolve around Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress. So Luo falls in love with a seamstress who lives a couple villages over, and the boys find another boy who is in the re-education camp, in the prison camp, who has a collection of forbidden Western literature. Because Sijie is French, now lives in France, a lot of this literature was French literature, so Balzac, Dumas, I don't think there's any Perrault. I think we're doing 19th and 20th century French literature. And they are absolutely enamored of the stories in these banned books, and they try to sneak some to the seamstress so that she can also get like a Western education and have her mind expanded. Now, given the subject matter, you're probably asking like, how dark is this book? I would say it's not that dark. If you've read Night by Elie Wiesel, which is about a concentration camp, it's not nearly as graphic as that. There was one scene that I decided to skip. It was a scene of a dental procedure done under really inadvisable circumstances. I myself don't consider myself squeamish around dentistry things. I think it's kind of interesting. But even I was like, actually, you know, I don't need to read this. I get the gist. I don't need the graphic description. So if you do have like phobias around dental practice, there's one scene that you should definitely skip, but I think the rest of it you'll be okay with. The next thing I finished was that short story, which was Lyra's Oxford by Philip Pullman. Now I gotta say, although I very much enjoy the His Dark Materials series, I'm not really seeing the point of any of these like interstitial short works. What happened in this story? I don't know, some stuff. I vaguely remember, but I truly do not care. The next Philip Pullman work that I read will be La Belle Sauvage, which is like another full novel in the sort of sequel trilogy to His Dark Materials. A 2.5, but honestly I don't even care, to Lyra's Oxford. And then I also read a short story collection, Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. The almost eponymous story of which, The Story of Your Life, was adapted into the film Arrival a couple of years ago. And it was specifically that story that made me want to read this book. I actually have not seen the film Arrival, so that wasn't clouding my judgment of it. And that was also turned out to be the story that I enjoyed the most. For the most part, these are speculative fiction works, mostly science fiction, but there's also a work of like, I guess it's Bible fan fiction, most of which I found like decently interesting while I was reading, but have not made a huge impact on my life. 2 that I would point out are the shortest story in the collection, only 2 or 3 pages, called something like The Development human science, this something of human science, which takes the form of more of an essay, but like a fictional essay, as opposed to a plot-based story, and I thought was very interesting. The other one I would draw your attention to is Understand, which I think is very interesting, read in concert with Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keynes, or is it just Keys? Flowers for Algernon was originally a short story and was turned into a novel. Honestly, you only have to read the short story. In Understand, our narrator and main character suffered brain damage when he nearly drowned and has been given an experimental drug meant to repair brain function, but which is making him super intelligent. And it's really interesting to compare with Flowers for Algernon, where another character is given a brain-enhancing drug, an intelligence-enhancing drug, because Charlie in Flowers for Algernon remains like lovable and sweet, but the guy in Understand truly despicable. And honestly, vague reminiscence of Death Note, of the parts of Death Note which I liked, as opposed to the many parts of Death Note which I did not like. So as our narrator becomes super intelligent, he starts to get kind of paranoid and obsessed with like one-upping, with getting ahead of government agencies and also any other super intelligences who might be out there trying to mess with his game. And then finally, Story of Your Life is the last one that I care to talk about. So it was very interesting in that there's like two basically completely separate things going on. One is the story of your life part. So this story is being narrated by a woman who, I believe when she's narrating it, she's in like her late middle age. And she's sort of telling the story of her daughter's life to her now deceased daughter. So it's very like typical cute things, like, you know, her daughter's first crush, like hearing about her daughter's first crush or first date. She's divorced, so like how her daughter, you know, dealt with the divorce. And then on the other hand, this woman, while she's being a mom, was also deciphering alien language. So an alien species which humans have named the heptapods because they have 7 legs, have arrived on Earth and are attempting to communicate. She is a linguistics expert, and so she's been brought in to decipher their speech and their writing, which it turns out to be different projects. So if you know me, you're like, obviously this is the story Libby was interested in. It's about like weird linguistics. And the thing I knew vaguely what the story is about when I went into it. And the thing I was sort of most concerned about was, would Ted Chiang be able to like present us with a language that was sufficiently alien to be like an alien language? And he did. Like, I was mainly just interested. I would read a textbook about the language in this story. So I thought that part was very successful. I'm still mulling over how well I think these two almost entirely separate narratives work together. This is definitely a story I'm interested in rereading, because like what the end sort of tries to connect them and make them work together. So I think I am interested in reading it again from the beginning. So I gave 3.5 stars to Stories of Your Life and Others, although specifically to The Story of Your Life, I would give that one a 4.5. And then last book that I finished, I have here in Gloria's physical copy. It is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, author of the much lauded and deservedly lauded Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So Piranesi is very hard to talk about because you basically spend the first 100 pages having no idea what's going on. There is a man who one guy calls Piranesi, so we'll call that his name. He lives in a seems like endless house made of white marble, with lots of marble statues in various halls that are connected to each other. This house also contains like the sea and the sky and some animals, but only one other person called the Other. Our narrator seems to find this all perfectly normal, and he's just sort of describing his life, like gathering the seaweed to dry and eat, encountering an albatross, occasionally having conversations with the other, who seems frankly strange and a little bit rude. And so if you're going to read this book, you just sort of have to like accept that you're gonna be cruising along for 100 pages with no answers. And of course my mind was wildly trying to find answers. I was like, okay, is this fantasy? And like, this is really real. It's not a metaphor. Is this magical realism and this is a metaphor for something else? Is this like a sci-fi, like horrific torture chamber that they're in? I did spend a couple of pages trying to make sense of this being a post-apocalyptic ocean city. I'll tell you right now that was wrong. It's not a post-apocalyptic ocean city. Although, for the record, would I read a book set in a post-apocalyptic ocean city? Hell yes. So the main driver of the plot is really, who are these people? What is going on? What is the world? I thought it was very interesting. It was not as good as Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Perhaps nothing can be. So I gave Piranesi 4 stars. And that is it for the things I read in May. Thank you all very much for watching. I will see you again soon.